The rationales for recruiting and accepting transfer students at four-year schools can be viewed through several different lenses. Today, I'm going to talk about access, diversity, and economic impacts, bringing in theories of academic capitalism and resource dependence. The first is student access to higher education. According to the American Council on Education, the U.S. lags behind other nations in terms of access to higher education. Multiple sources tout the fact that earning a bachelor's degree is necessary to earn higher incomes, have greater choice in jobs, and job satisfaction. Unfortunately, one of the biggest predictors of those who will achieve this goal is having parents who have achieved it in the past. Parents' income level, education status, and race have as great an impact on who gets into college as merit in many cases. According to our text, Public Policy in Higher Education, written by St. John, Don Barnett, and Marinsky Chapman, the U.S. is pushing to expand access for students in order to improve our nation's position in the increasingly global economy. In this text, the authors affirm that there continue to be disparities with regard to access. Recruiting and accepting transfer students is one way to help reduce this inequality, given the race and socioeconomic status of many transfer students. This was also one reason for the Higher Education Act of 1965. Lyndon Johnson designed this legislation to create higher levels of access for low and middle income students by providing financial aid. The Higher Education Act has been reauthorized several times since its inception in 1972 to include provisions for Pell Grants, which provide money for low-income students that does not need to be repaid. Community colleges add to this mission of access by providing low-cost education for workforce development or general education requirements for transfer students. For community colleges to be effective, universities must be willing to admit transfer students. Fallon agrees with this and goes on to state that in order to create the type of education needed in this scenario, students need to learn to work collaboratively in diverse groups. Recruiting and retaining community college students or other transfer students can certainly help make this a reality. The NESE data shows us that transfer students are demographically different from typical college students, generally more racially diverse and often older than the traditional college student. Because of this, the presence of transfer students helps to change the culture at an institution for the better. This viewpoint was also asserted by Supreme Court Justice Powell during his decision on the Regents of the University of California versus Bakke. This was an affirmative action lawsuit in which the justices were pretty divided, but eventually ruled that University of California had to admit the white student who had previously been denied admission due to affirmative action quotas. Justices ruled that race should play a role in admittance decisions in accordance with the Civil Rights Act, but shouldn't be the only factor. However, when writing up his formal decision, Justice Powell remarked on the importance of diversity in creating the best environment for learning to take place. Sean Harper, who wrote Creating Inclusive Campus Environments, goes one step further. He declares that institutions must create opportunities for meaningful interactions among the students in order to truly make a difference. Harper encourages colleges to be intentional about creating inclusive campus environments and classroom activities. High-impact practices may be one way to accomplish that. It's also important for us to recognize that knowledge and information are considered public goods, which, according to Dr. McClure, have to be non-rivalrous, meaning that we can all use it up without running out of it, and non-excludable, meaning everyone can benefit. Certainly, having a more educated populace not only increases career and earnings potentials for individual students and family, it also helps to boost the economy of our nation. A recent article in the Journal of Education Economics maintains that education is the most important factor in economic growth in the United States. Additionally, increased knowledge and information make us competitive internationally as well. Slaughter and Rhodes offers a different lens from which to view this, one of academic capitalism. According to Slaughter and Rhodes, globalization is a central component of the new economy. In the theory of academic capitalism, students are viewed as consumers. As such, marketing strategies that focus on the bottom line should be targeted to those consumers. Further, fluctuations in the economy have created changes in the higher education environment, whereby increasing the number of transfer students looking for an institution in which to complete their undergraduate education. According to resource dependence theory, this is best handled by targeting one's marketing strategies toward these individuals who are looking for some place to spend their money or their financial aid dollars. Additionally, according to Fowles, resource dependence theory would suggest that because an increased proportion of a school's budget relies on tuition revenue rather than state appropriations, which have been declining, this will lead to an increased amount of expenditures going towards educational activities. This could include a variety of things. The study I will propose today will offer some evidence as to the best place to spend that money in the future. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. Lastly, I want to talk about principal agency theory, as discussed in the Bastido text. This theory suggests that when one depends on the action of another, an agency relationship results. This has typically been one individual and another, or in the context of an organization, with a manager and an employee, for example. However, one extension of this theory into the field of higher education posits that students contract with institutions to provide them an education. Institutions are then dependent upon students to choose their school and thus bring FTE. Since students have a choice about where they'll go for their undergraduate education, colleges are motivated to market their institutions in such a way as to attract and retain students, including transfer students who are looking for a new home. Many different sources, including the NESE, the SESI, and the St. John text, confirm that transfer students are different from native students on a number of different demographic characteristics. Transfer students are most likely to be from racial minority groups, have lower socioeconomic status backgrounds, traditionally work, often full-time, and many care for dependents. Let me pause here for a moment to address a shortcoming in the literature. Although many, maybe even most, students who transfer in come from a community college, but not all of them do. There are many four-year to four-year transfers. However, the largest majority of the literature focuses on community college populations. I didn't find any articles looking at four-year to four-year transfers on any topic related to engagement or high-impact practices. I will mention one study in a few minutes that looked at both 2-year to 4-year and 4-year to 4-year, and interestingly found no differences between those two groups, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's keep this in mind as we go forward and examine the literature on transfer students. So in terms of sense of belonging, all transfer students have a need to start over in terms of building friendships and relationships, which can be difficult for anybody. However, it's more difficult for transfer students who may not be accepted by their peers due to the differences just mentioned. In a paper written by Sylvie Hurtado and colleagues, issues surrounding tokenism are discussed. Tokenism is a phenomenon that relates to affirmative action policies, where a small number of minorities are enrolled just to be able to say that an institution is diverse or has met some quota. Even if this isn't happening intentionally, students may perceive this to be the case and assume that students from minority groups are not as capable. Also, if there are a few minorities on campus, there's a tendency for them to be seen as somehow representative of their group, which is an unfair generalization to say the least. For example, just because a student is the only married person in the room doesn't mean that he can or should be expected to speak for the whole population of husbands. This can present an obstacle to building friendships on campus. These pressures, coupled with the fact that universities seem more focused on enrolling minority students than making them feel welcome on campus, creates a barrier for these students in terms of their sense of belonging. Suggestions from Harper on creating inclusive campus environments would help solve some of these problems, but seem to be happening slowly. For example, creating physical space that celebrates diversity through art and literature, or making activities and organizations more inclusive, would be useful. Additionally, based on the information from the study the three of you conducted, it all adds up. It's also more difficult for students from lower socioeconomic status to make friends because they often abstain from activities due to cost or have to pass on activities due to family or work obligations. With the issues of making friends and feeling like they fit in on campus, certainly a sense of belonging is a challenge for some of these students. Unfortunately, faculty beliefs and attitudes may exacerbate the problem as well. According to Milam and Umbach, opponents to diversity refute the need for diversity on campus at all and contend that it might even lead to a less vibrant educational community. In their study, Milam and Umbach did find that women and ethnic minorities were more likely to appreciate the need for diversity on campus and to be prepared to teach about issues of diversity. However, in a profession still dominated by white men, the problem remains. Many resources we read in McClure's class refer to the fact that faculty are overworked, a point to which I can personally attest. For some faculty, finding the time to learn about diversity sufficiently to incorporate it into their course effectively, or to be prepared to help with transition programs that might help transfer students feel more welcome, simply may be too much to ask. This is especially true if they're in the group who find diversity on campus unnecessary to begin with. Altbach, Berdahl, and Gumport mention in their text that on many campuses there is a controversy regarding the provision of remedial programs for underrepresented students. These are programs that may target reading, writing, or math skills that are less than what would be necessary to complete the college courses that students are required to take. The reason faculty may resist teaching these types of classes may be due to the fact that most faculty are overworked. It might also be the fact that many feel like remedial education should be happening at the community college level rather than at the university. Nonetheless, this creates a little bit of a unwelcoming environment for those students. Further, based on your study, it all adds up. Many of the practices and policies on college campuses create an environment that seems unwelcoming to students struggling to pay for college, which will be the case for many of our transfer students. All of these issues may create a scenario where transfer students may struggle to achieve a sense of belonging on campus. Since we've already made a case for the fact that institutions need to recruit and accept transfer students onto their campus, an effort needs to be made to make them more hospitable for these students. Becoming a Student-Ready College, written by McNair, Albertine, Cooper, McDonald, and Major, stresses that institutional changes must be made in order to enhance student success, and that a student-focused culture of leadership must include the needs of underrepresented populations.